I finished up loading the Grendel, and I was going to load a box of Lehigh 121 grain copper bullets. But as I pulled out the box and opened them up and looked at them, I found that this, although it's a 120 and I like 120s in the Grendel, the VLD design with that long ogive was not going to allow me to load to magazine length, because I do want to feed up through the magazine and use the gun as an autoloader like it was designed. Now, something like this would be great, excuse me, in Grendel, if you were going to load for a bolt action rifle or a single shot or something like that. In my mind, then you could use your overall length gauge with a modified case if you're using the Hornady system, or just, you can drill and tap your own fireform casing and get the OAL till you're touching the lands and grooves, and you can push this out as far as you can. Maybe load 3, 5, 7 thousandths off the lands and grooves, and that can help with your accuracy quite a bit. But a little bit tougher deal when you're loading for a semi-automatic rifle. Now, some manufacturers will make their magazines a bit longer, and they're more generous with the space inside the receiver there, so you can load out a little bit further. The gun I'm going to be pushing this through doesn't allow for that option for me. So I decided, I said, we're going to use these in the Creedmoor, 6.5 Creedmoor. So that's what we're doing. I've got a bunch of Starline brass here, and I've got some Lapua casings over there. The Starlines are going to be large rifle. Lapua is going to be the small rifle. So I need to do I'm going to do the same powder charge, but I'm going to be using small rifle Magnum casings for the Lapua and regular large rifle bench rest CCIs for the standard large rifle primer pockets in the Starline brass. So these were casings that have been fired one time already in a bolt action rifle, but I'm loading them now for an auto loader. So I am using an RCBS small base die set rather than a full length die set, because I don't want to have feeding and lockup problems in an auto loader. So now I started in sizing the casings after I cleaned them with my Imperial sizing die wax. And I have been using this for probably a couple of years now, and I've still got some left. I love this stuff. Waxes in general work really well. But I'm noticing, man, I'm having to use quite a bit of force to push these down into that small base die. So I thought, you know what? That RCBS gel type lube that you put on one of the pads and then you smear it around, you grab some casings and you kind of lightly roll them across the pad. I just remembered that stuff always worked really well. But you're doing, half a dozen casings at a time and your hands are getting goopy, and it's like, it works great, but whatever. I'd prefer to go with a different method. But I thought, you know what? I'll bet you that's going to work even better. And I remembered I had an old tube that was sitting over there on my section with used stuff. So I went over there, and sure enough, that tube's been sitting there, and it's an old tube. So I grabbed that, and I start squirting some out, and I've got my brasses in a bag like this, right? So I grab this tube, and I go to squirt some out, and it's not coming out the top. And I thought, oh, geez, maybe it got a little crusty at the nozzle there. So I'm looking around. I'm gonna grab like a dental pick or something to clear out the hole. And I'm squeezing on it a little bit more. And then I noticed my hands starting to feel wet and goopy. And then I realized, uh-oh, the thing blew out the bottom, and I was squirting this gel all over the place. And it's right here on the bench. And so I've got this now all over my hand. So I just, with my brass in this bag, I'm just using my hand to basically lube all of these casings that I've already got in this bag. And then when I'm done, I'm trying to be careful not to goop it up too much. So when I put it in the sizing die, I don't want to end up with a bunch of hydraulic dents. Remember, if you've got too much, particularly in a gel type lube or even wax, if there's too much stuff on the casing, when you put it into the die, there's nowhere for it to go. So what's going to happen is it's going to dent the casing. And I didn't want that. So I'm trying to be careful. I want to clean up my hands for the most part, get this stuff off of there. And man, did they go in and out of those dies beautifully. That was just as slick as can be. But see, now I'm kind of gooped up with this stuff. And I grabbed the industrial purple simple green, because simple green I like using as a degreaser for just lots of stuff because it works well. But this stuff is so thick, even the purple simple green wasn't cutting it. So I thought, okay, what else have I got handy that's going to do a quick job of this? And I've got an old quart jar of Hoppy's No.9, the old stuff that smells so good. So I grabbed that after I'd sized all my casings. I put a little bit of that on a towel, and it just degreased those casings wonderfully. After that, I threw them in a vibratory tumbler with just some dry walnut just to make sure I got all the residue off of there, because I want my casings, pretty dry, and I don't know that I need a bunch of Hoppy's residue on brass. So I want that all cleaned up. So I got that taken care of. The casings, they look beautiful. And I've got my broken little tube of RCBS gel in that bag for next time, because I'm going to use it because the stuff works well. Just got to deal with that little issue. But then, because this is a wood top bench, I had that because I'd set it right here. I had it right here on the bench, and it leaked all over the bench. So I took that and with the Hoppies on a towel, and I started wiping that up. Man, that's better than linseed oil. You want to redo a stock? Take some of that RCBS stuff, goop up your stock, and then take some Hoppy's No.9 and kind of wipe it off of there. It just looks really nice. Check that nicest looking spot on my bench right there. This is the stuff you run into. If you make ammo a lot and on a regular and routine basis, it's just how it is. Roll with it, deal with it. It's fine. Laugh at the stuff that goes sideways on you and just keep moving forward. It's really not that big a deal. Okay, so past that, now I had intended, because I have a few, I used to carry tons of Redding stuff. Well, I've got 3 Redding PR50 powder dispensers that have been in stock that I haven't sold. That, you know what? I've never even used one of those. You've got 3 of them. Open up a box, put it on your press, and play with it. See how well it does. Because when you're using an extruded powder like H4350, now because in 6.5 Creedmoor I know H4350 works great in a bolt gun. Frankly, I prefer, and in M1As, by the way, M14s, H4895 works really well too. And this was going to be in an autoloader, but I didn't have any of that. So I'm using the H4350, which I know is going to be fine still, but it's a little bit longer extrusion. And with a lot of the dispensers, what can happen is you go to move the handle and you can feel it crunching as that barrel rotates. Redding, with their design, they made the top of that and the top of the metering screw that you move in or out to make the cavity larger or smaller, to increase or decrease the amount of powder it's going to drop. The top of that has a hemisphere to it. Of course, the barrel being round has a hemisphere to it already. So when you combine those 2 hemispheres working together, you get less of that crunching. Now you can feel there's like an increased pressure when it is closing off the cavity, but it's not like crunch. You know what I mean? It does make a very dramatic improvement. So I'm all set up here. I've got my Dillon. This is an old Dillon primer flip tray. It's seen better days, but it works just great, and I like it. I like the color of it, actually. I like the way they did them before. So I've got some Starline brass here. This is, again, Starline's going to be the large rifle primer, where the Pua's got the small. I've got a flash hole deburring tool, and I'm going through the mouth of the casing. I put this in here, and I just give it a little twist. If you're not familiar with a flash hole deburring tool, you see the angle here, like that on the tool. On the inside of the casing, they form the casing and they come through with a punch, and that can leave a burr on the inside of the flash hole, kind of like that. So when you come in through the mouth with the tool that's at an angle like this, on the inside of the casing, and takes that burr, knocks it off, and now you've got something that looks more like that on the inside of the casing. So the flash from the primer goes through the flash hole and it gives a more even dispersal of spark on the powder charge. That's why I do that. And of course, a deburring tool, do a quick deburr on the inside and the outside of the mouth of the casing. Do not turn the mouth of your casing into a knife edge. All you're going to do is if there's any burrs, you can knock it off. On the inside, if you want to use a teeny bit more pressure to have, and you can get VLD type deburring tool, so you can change the angle when the bullet is being seated in there, so you're not scraping the sides of the projectile. You can get deburring tools that are more like this, more like that, more like that. You decide. Just do something to deburr. You don't have to, but it's a good idea, and you will notice after a while when you're paying close attention that you get little tiny amounts of copper that are actually coming off if you don't do anything with that. And I just want to keep my bullets looking as nice as I can. So I have here the large primer arm setup on the Redding T7 press. And this thing, when I push this forward, I'm trying to do this sort of backwards because the camera of the iPad is over here. It's kind of like the weatherman. You ever watch the weather and you notice that the guy's doing this and he doesn't turn his back to you? That's more tricky than you might think because it's not natural. And me being right-handed, never mind. So give it a push forward, seats my primer. It's doing about 4 or 5 thousandths below flush, which is working for me just fine. If I had any issues at all, I could take a primer pocket uniformer, or I could do a deburr on the inside lip of the primer pocket just to make the primer slide in a little bit easier. But I'm not having any issues at all. It's just working fine, so it ain't broken. I'm not going to fix it. So I have my die set up to get me with these projectiles to my OAL of 2.795. Now I have here with the Redding PR50, it's set up to drop, and I've got my Redding scale ready to go. On the side of the T7 here, on the frame, there is a recess. So when you put a powder dispenser into the station 2 up, you notice the configuration that I've got here. I've got my seating die, empty space, powder dispenser. Now, me being right-handed, I want the handle on the right side. If you're left-handed, maybe you go the other way. It's going to work better for you. But the pan, I can put this right here, and I just simply up, down, and I'm holding it to the bottom here. So all the powder is going into the pan, and it's not splashing out of the pan onto the bench all over the place. Now, typically, I will set this up to drop a tenth or two, maybe under, so that I can trickle up to exactly the amount that I want. And here, I came in about 2/10 under, so I've got a trickler right here. Trickle that back up to exactly the amount I'm looking for. Pull my prime casing off of the shell holder, dump that in. The Lyman funnel here, it's got a nice wide mouth, so when you get cruising, you can be a little bit sloppy and not drop powder all over the place. So if you got a little bit wider mouth on your funnel, that works. Put that casing now here, set my bullet on top. Now, because that is a boat tail design, I do not have to flare the mouth or anything like that. I set it on there and it sits pretty straight up and down, and I just run that up most of the way, lower it. I'm going to give it a quarter turn, run it all the way up, and that is a beautiful looking 6.5 Creed that I just cannot wait to get out and shoot. Happy trails.